what we call our wisdom systems. So we've done a lot of work in the past with the Soil Association and their Food for Life program, which is a fantastic program going into schools, encouraging them to grow herbs in the classroom and then learn about their health benefits and how to use them in recipes. And we've also got an education element in our advocacy program, working within schools in London to teach children about the health benefits of herbs and spices as well.
We know that lots of herbs and foods are going to have a health benefit through interacting with the gut microbes. So working directly with all the healthy bacteria that we have in our gut that contribute positively to our overall well-being.
You know, we can look at all the research out there showing that ginseng is amazing, or ginger, but at Pukka we're also guided by these wisdom systems, and our three core ones are Ayurveda, which I'm trained in, and Marion's a Western herbalist, but we've also got people trained in traditional Chinese medicine. And those are the three wisdom systems which are really thriving around the world today. But it's easy to forget that every country and culture would have had its own traditional way of using plants and herbs.
Welcome to The Wellness Way with me, Philly J. Lay, a layperson's guide to your natural health systems, your very own NHS. Hello, lovely people, and welcome to another episode of The Wellness Way. And if you tuned in last week, I had the wonderful Sebastian Pohl, who was the founder of Pukka Herbs, Pukka Tea, on the show. And I wanted to take the conversation a little bit deeper. So today I've got on two fantastic women who are basically the researchers, the brains, the bout behind Pukka now that Sebastian has left. So I'd want to introduce you to Jo Webber and Marion Mackonochie. Is that right, Marion? Have I said it right?
That's right, yeah, Mackonochie.
Mackonochie. Thank you so much for coming on the show, ladies. Really brilliant to have you here. Now, herbal teas, absolute passion of mine. As I said, a massive part of my healing journey. You have my favorite teas. I love the new one and the cleanse. And talk to me about teas. Talk to me how you decide and blend your teas, because I know that it's an art form that you work on. You know, how many in the team working on the blending?
There's three in our development team, but it's a sort of a broader team that decides on the tea. So the concept, someone will come up with the concept, and then multiple people will work on, you know, what herbs do we think could or should be in the blend for effect and for flavour, and it'll go through multiple people, all feeding in, you know, well, this herb has this benefit and that herb has that flavour, and then we have a synergy wheel. I don't know, Jo, if you want to talk a little bit about the synergy wheel and the different roles of the herbs within the synergy wheel.
Yeah, so this is something that's very much come from what we call our wisdom systems. So, you know, we can look at all the research out there showing that ginseng is amazing, or ginger. But at Pukka, we're also guided by these wisdom systems, and our three core ones are Ayurveda, which I'm trained in, and Marion's a Western herbalist. But we've also got people trained in traditional Chinese medicine. And those are the three wisdom systems which are really thriving around the world today. But it's easy to forget that every country and culture would have had its own traditional way of using plants and herbs. But some of those have really got lost. Others are having a revival, like Aboriginal medicine or African herbal medicine. And these traditions have this idea when you're building a formula, which essentially a herbal tea is a formula that you're drinking 2 or 3 times a day, is you have a lead herb with a dominant effect on what we call the need state. So maybe someone is having trouble sleeping or digesting, or they're getting a bit stiff in their joints, for example, or they're seeking hormonal balance. So there'll be a lead herb. And then the idea is to put in a deputy herb. So every leader needs a good deputy to back up and support them. And then you have other herbs that have a harmonizing effect. So this is the magic of the blend. When you add something like licorice, which is in many of our teas, it just helps bring the whole blend together. It helps with mouthfeel. It's quite a sort of heavy herb in the mouth. I love it. It's one of my favorites. It's a bit of a Marmite flavour, but quite often we put it in such small amounts, people who don't like licorice can't taste it, but sometimes they do and they don't like it. But we have teas without licorice.
Sorry to interrupt this podcast. Why don't you come and sign up to my newsletter at phillyjlay.com, where we can keep connected and we can talk about lots of things going on in the world. You will also get my free manifestation meditation so you can become a shit hot manifester too. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share. And turn your notifications on so you never miss an episode. Thank you.
The other benefit of, Jo, the other benefit of licorice is that it does help herbs to blend together with each other, and it will also help a herb that's not so water soluble be more water soluble because of the saponin content that it has in it, sort of soapy properties that help things mix together a little bit more, which is why licorice haters, we're very sorry, we do have licorice in quite a lot of our teas because it has this brilliant harmonizing effect to bring things together. Sorry, Jo, for interrupting.
No, that's okay. And then we've got a digestive herb. So even if the herb is to help support sleep, we still need to be able to digest and absorb. So quite often ginger's in there or black pepper. And then there's even a herb to help take it to the target organ. So some herbs have a very specific place that they go to in the body. So all of that wisdom comes in combined with the latest research to show which herbs are really impactful. But ultimately, it has to be delicious. If it's a really healthy tea that will help people, but it's not delicious, people aren't going to enjoy it and they're not going to take it. And the idea is the diversity is needed there. If you love one particular herbal tea, don't drink 10, 15 cups of that one tea a day, because, have maybe 3 or 4 different types of herbal tea in the day, because then you're getting that diversity of herbs into your gut.
I kind of do mine on a wing and a prayer. I just go out in my garden, whatever I've got there, whether it's an olive leaf or a raspberry leaf or obviously dandelion and stinging nettle go in every single teapot I do. Licorice goes in every teapot I do as well. Love it. So and mint, because I just really enjoy that freshness of mint. Let's talk about some of the health benefits of mint, because a lot of people think of it, it's just a flavoring for a chewing gum or, mint sauce with a bit of lamb, but it's a beautiful plant. And there are so many different varieties. I think I'm now, and I mean, I'm tiny compared to Pukka, but I'm growing about 20 different varieties now. And I've just discovered apple mint, which I love. And it's just growing in abundance in my garden, and it's absolutely beautiful. So let's talk about mint for a little bit, because I haven't covered that one on this show.
Yeah, so mint is a really, really lovely herb often used for digestion. There's a lot of really good research to show that sort of peppermint essential oil, particularly when it's in a capsule, that sort of will get through to the lower digestive system. Really good for stopping cramping, sort of spasmolytic, so it stops the gut from spasming up, and can be really good for bloating and discomfort and IBS type symptoms.
I'm going to ask you there, with something like IBS or really bad period crampings, would you actually think you're saying it's better to take it in a capsule rather than just having the mint tea? Yeah.
No, I mean, I get great benefit from the mint tea. This is going back to this whole problem of research versus practice of herbal medicine. The majority of the research is on capsules of peppermint essential oil. That doesn't mean that the herbal tea itself isn't effective. It just means people haven't done enough research to look at that particular benefit. So I personally, from my own experience of using mint tea, I find it to be really effective, and particularly for something like digestion. Teas are a great way of getting a benefit, because you're putting the liquid exactly where it needs to have its effect. So I would, absolutely use herbal teas for digestive and for mint particularly. It's also quite an interesting one because the menthol, we know, activates specific cold receptors in our nerve endings, in the way that capsaicin, the active component of chili, also activates heat receptors in our nerve endings. So menthol or mint put topically on the skin can be really good for headache. because it sort of confuses the nerve endings, makes it think something's being activated when it isn't, and can sort of act as a counter to the pain and sort of distract your nerves away from it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, a little roller of an oil with a little bit of peppermint essential oil within it can be quite a good. Avoid your eye area, obviously, but it can be quite good for a headache.
That's wonderful. I mean, I remember when I was testing whether I was celiac, and I had the last week, because I had to do 6 weeks of eating gluten, and the last week my migraines were off the scale. I couldn't move, I couldn't see, and so my daughter kind of said, "Oh, I'll just Google what Dr. Mackonochie says," and it was chili, using cayenne pepper, and it was 3 teaspoons in bone broth. And I now know the benefits of cayenne pepper, which I didn't know then, and the benefits are crazy. I met a woman last weekend who actually said, learning the benefits of cayenne pepper, I saved my husband's life when he had a massive heart attack, and the ambulance didn't come, and I got cayenne pepper down his neck. Sorry, Jo. What would you like to add to that?
I was just going back to this capsule point as well. And Ayurveda is really into tasting things in the mouth. So we don't really think about this, but the mouth is the beginning of our gut. And there's 6 key tastes in Ayurveda. And the idea is to get a good balance. But even tasting the bitter taste in the mouth will start to have an effect down the gut as well. So if we're swallowing capsules, which I do sometimes because it's handy and easy, but traditionally Ayurveda would have you put some powder in the mouth and have some warm water and swallow it like that, because the idea is the medicine starts in the mouth. And interestingly, there's a herb called triphala, which actually tastes better the more you start to detoxify. So when people first start taking it, it really doesn't taste very nice.
I don't know that herb, triphala.
Triphala, it's called the 3 fruits formula. It's one of the most common detoxifying, cleansing, digestive supports. But the idea is having it in the mouth. And what's so wonderful about mint is it just really is like a weed. Once you've got it growing, never plant it in a flower bed like I did, because it will take over. So you have to have it in a pot, but it'll just thrive in any pot in a sunny place. And you can just pick a few leaves, add some hot water, and then you get these lovely menthol essential oils. So it's a really nice tea to actually breathe in the steam before you drink it, to kind of wake up your senses. And we've actually got a tea called Breathe In with eucalyptus and mint to have that impact of the beneficial steam. Because also, drinking teas, as Marion said, is a really great way. It's how humans have taken herbs for much of our history. But putting things like rosemary and mint and eucalyptus in water and inhaling the steam is also a really lovely way to benefit from the essential oils.
It's really important that you brought up there the mouth and the taste, because we have become a society, and I was very much guilty of this when I started my journey of popping the supplements and, just kind of thinking, I've had my 30 this week out of the supplements, but it is completely different, isn't it? And the majority of supplements, not all by any means, and certainly not the Pukka ones, but a lot of the supermarket supplements are crammed with fillers and nasties that we don't want in our bodies, and yet we've just been, it's been such a heavy marketing ploy on us that get your supplements, get your supplements. And I hadn't ever really thought about that, Jo, about the mouth absolutely is the beginning. And I do an Ayurvedic practice every morning when I wake up of scraping my tongue, and I have a lovely copper tongue scraper, and I get a scrape and get all the bacteria out. But then you've got to put all the new and all the fresh in. And I thank you for bringing that up. It's a really important point. We have become far too dependent on popping those pills and not savoring. And our senses are so important to us, all of the senses, and smelling them when you're cooking them. So now I want to come on to the fact that Pukka is a B Corp and has the most beautiful ethos as a company. And could you first of all tell us what a B Corp is? Because when I first learned about them, I presumed that they were all organic, and they're not.
Yeah, so B Corp is a growing movement of businesses trying to be a force for good. And it's not that they're perfect, but they're all striving to improve their social and environmental impact. And Pukka was in the very first wave of B Corps in the UK. So we were one of the pioneers to get the B Corp certification. And the idea is every couple of years you get recertified and you need to improve your score year on year. So there's quite an incentive there. And you've got major grocers like Waitrose with B Corp aisles now in the supermarket to help consumers recognise that these companies are doing as much as they can. There's always more work to be done. But I think a growing number of consumers are recognising the B Corp logo on various foods and other goods. So yeah, it's a force for good.
It's so good to hear about Waitrose. I don't go into supermarkets very often. I don't eat food from supermarkets. I'd like you to introduce yourself and tell our audience a little bit about your journey, how you got to Pukka, and what you're doing within the company. Jo, could we start with you, my lovely, please?
Of course. So yes, my name's Jo Webber. I'm primarily an Ayurvedic practitioner, also a yoga teacher. And I guess my two lifelong passions are health and well-being, but combining that with education. I did train as a school teacher at one point, but definitely prefer mainly educating adults on these issues. But I'm really passionate about schools becoming healthier places. And I'm currently head of herbal education at Pukka Herbs, which really combines those two key passions of mine. So yeah, lifelong interest in health and well-being, but Ayurveda is really answered so many questions of mine. So hopefully we can talk about that a little today.
Absolutely. I've had a couple of podcasts up on Ayurveda, and Sebastian obviously spoke a little bit about it, and it is a fascinating subject. So yeah, I'm going to touch on it again. Marion, I'd like to come to you, my lovely. Please tell us all about yourself.
Hi, Philly. My name's Marion. I'm a Western herbal practitioner, so a herbalist like Jo, but from the Western tradition. Also a herbal researcher. So I have always loved plants and health and their interaction together. So I started out doing a degree in pharmacology and physiology, exploring how drugs work in the body. Got into science publishing and worked for a few years on science drug discovery journals, but gradually got a bit disillusioned with pharmaceuticals and the research that sort of supports them, and discovered the wonders of herbs. So I did a short course in herbal medicine with a lovely herbalist. And got really inspired by that. So then retrained in herbal medicine, doing a 3-year degree, and became a practitioner. But I've always loved looking into how things work and the research behind things. So I then did sort of some further study and a master's in plant chemistry and medicinal natural products, and that sort of brought the two loves together of science and herbs. And then I've been at Pukka now as a senior herbal specialist for about 5.5 years.
Thank you. Brilliant. Now, you talked there about the medical system, and and we touched on Ayurveda there, and it's really hard to actually make something like Ayurvedic medicine fit into the new allopathic system of testing and finding results that the pharmaceutical companies or the companies, doctors, will be happy with. And how do you do that? Because with Ayurvedic, every single body is different. We have our doshas, and every single person is different. And so every plant is different, we can only presume. And how do you marry the two and get those into research that you can actually state that something is good for you?
So I handle that from the people.
Yeah,
and
you jump into Ayurveda first, Jo. Yeah.
It's a really fascinating area. Like you say, there's no one size fits all treatment in Ayurveda. So if 6 different people come to see me with irritable bowel syndrome, they'll get 6 personalized treatment programs. And that's really, really hard to look at with a randomized control trial. But there are studies looking at Ayurvedic treatments, including Panchakarma, which is the deep cleansing process, standardizing things as much as they can. So people are really trying. There's a lot of great research coming out of India, particularly. But I think it's spreading by word of mouth, because people aren't getting their health needs met sometimes by the NHS. So they're coming and exploring Ayurveda, mainly by working on digestion. They're having fantastic results, and they're telling their friends about it. But it is very, very challenging on a person-by-person basis to do clinical trials for some of Ayurveda's treatments. Marion, do you want to pick up on the herbs, a herb like turmeric, say how it works? Or
well, yeah, I mean, that's a tricky one to start with, because we've got lots of evidence that turmeric, from traditional understanding, is really good for digestion and the liver, but lots of the modern clinical evidence for it comes from its effect in inflammation and things like osteoarthritis, where there's actually really quite good clinical evidence for it. However, when you look into the mechanics of it, it's not very bioavailable. So the active ingredients in turmeric don't get absorbed into the body. So I guess the question then is, how is it actually having its effect? And I think some of the sort of the more that people look into the science behind some of these herbs, the more we can actually work out how things are working. So perhaps turmeric is having lots of its effect on directly on the gut, and that actually doesn't need to get into the body to have its beneficial effect. We know that lots of herbs and foods are going to have a health benefit through interacting with the gut microbes. So working directly with all the healthy bacteria that we have in our guts that contribute positively to our overall well-being. But also in the subject of looking at clinical evidence for Western herbal medicine as well. For example, there are some clinical studies that have been carried out to look at the way that herbalists practice. So we, as with Ayurveda, will take a patient or a client and look at all aspects of their health and how things are going for them, and devise a personalized treatment that's tailored for them. So again, it's very difficult to do a randomized clinical trial of that process, but sometimes that process has had research done on it, and the way that herbalists practice. So there is increasing evidence for to support herbal practice as it's carried out, as well as just the individual benefits of herbs, which we do know from lots of clinical studies they will have an effect.
There's a wonderful website called Green Med. I don't, because everybody goes to PubMed, Published Medical, to find out clinical trials, but there's a great site called Green Med that Sayajai does, and they have some. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of trials on turmeric, and turmeric is something that slightly confuses me, because as I'm going to ask you to clarify this, because there is the turmeric compound and there is curcumin, and all plants have different compounds. It's the same with the cannabis and CBD and that plant. So what evidence have you seen? Which way do you think it swings on turmeric, curcumin for the body? Which is the better for you? Do you take the supplement, which is the turmeric, or do you just take the curcumin? That is, for me, that's getting almost a little bit medical. They've taken a plant and they've tried to take the bioactive ingredient out of it and say that's the good one. So can you put us straight on that?
Yeah, I mean, as herbalists, we would always choose the whole herb rather than a sort of specific individual compound from it. Curcumin is one of is actually a number of different compounds. What we call curcumin is there's multiple curcuminoids, but it's one of over 200 different compounds that you find within turmeric. And some evidence also shows that the essential oils within turmeric, the turmerones, also have anti-inflammatory effects of their own. And we also know that there are certain compounds which will help other compounds be better absorbed. So it may be that the essential oils within turmeric are helpful for curcumin to be absorbed into the body. So I would always choose a whole herb extract myself, but a lot of the very high dose curcumin extracts have got good clinical evidence behind them, and it's possible that very high curcumin levels will have more of a drug-like, will be more effective in some situations. So yeah, not definitive answer yet. Science is still looking into it.
I think what's interesting is taking this pharmaceutical approach to using herbal medicine, which we've just been talking about, such as taking high doses of curcumin extract. You do remove one of the beauties of herbal medicine, which is when a plant contains 300 or so compounds like turmeric, there's a buffer and a synergy effect that we don't quite understand yet. So compounds are working to synergistically enhance some aspects and buffer some potential side effects, because herbs can have side effects, just like Western medications can have side effects. But they tend to have fewer because of this buffering effect. And we don't really understand it all, but all the traditional wisdom systems used whole herbs. They may have combined them with fat sometimes to enhance absorption, or a little bit of black pepper, which contains piperine, to enhance absorption. But they definitely didn't take out the compounds. But I do have a sympathy with the research industry trying to show how these herbs work. It's much easier to pick out one of the main active compounds and give someone a high dose of that and show it's doing something. But it does go against all the principles of traditional healing, which is to use the whole spectrum herb.
So I'm going to tell you a funny story now. When I was really ill and I couldn't get out of bed for 2 years after my spinal fusion, I read about turmeric and I thought, right, I'm going to hit the turmeric hard and see if I can get the inflammation down and stop this pain in my back. And I was trying to get off the opioids for stopping the pain. And I think I overdid it. And I'm going to ask you if I overdid it. But I think I was taking about 15 turmeric tablets a day. And they were a good quality. They were a good make without all the crap added in and all the additives. But I was about 2 weeks into this and I had these terrible heart palpitations. And one of my girls came in to see me in bed and I said, my heart's going really fast, really fast. And she said, I don't know what to do, Mama. So she called an ambulance because she said, I don't know if you're having a heart attack. And I said, I don't know. So she called an ambulance and the ambulance men came. And my daughter explained that I hadn't really been out of bed for, at that point, it had been about 1.5 years. I hadn't left my bed and that I was trying to get off opioids and I'd been taking turmeric. And the ambulance man didn't for one moment say, are you still taking any opioids? This could be something to do with opioids. They just went, it's the turmeric. You shouldn't take 15 turmeric tablets a day. So I'm going to ask you, can you overdo this? Is 15 turmeric tablets too many?
Well, it depends how much turmeric was in each of these 15 tablets, and also turmeric is a food. It's remarkably, generally quite safe in very, very high doses. People consume it in very high doses as a food. So if it was pure turmeric powder with no standardized extract, no sort of pure curcumin in there, it's unlikely that that's what was causing it. But people do have very idiosyncratic and unexplained reactions to all sorts of foods and compounds. So it's kind of impossible to say in any one situation, but it seems unlikely. And if you were still taking opioids and trying to withdraw from opioids, that seems like a more likely answer. But I'm not a doctor, so I can't.
But I'll take that. So you talked then about black pepper, and some herbs, like turmeric, are water soluble and some are fat soluble. And could you just talk us through, because there are so many different compounds, how is the best way, if you're going to cook with them, how is the best way to actually get all the compounds and nutrients out of these beautiful, beautiful gifts from God, Mother Nature, whatever you wish to call it? What is the best way, would you say, to actually get those amazing benefits into your body?
I think if you look at a traditional Ayurvedic recipe or any recipe, quite often they have a fat-based stage where you're gently sizzling your spices in some ghee or coconut oil or even olive oil at a lower temperature. And then you're adding some vegetables or some lentils or some meat or fish and some liquid. and then you add a second lot of herbs and spices. And that rather beautifully has a fat extraction when you're sizzling at the beginning, as well as a water extraction. So many recipes have this. And something that I found really gratifying when I was looking at the research into herbs and spices is that many of the studies simulate these simple cooking methods. Some get really complicated and use alcohol extraction, and Marion could tell us more about that, when no one uses alcohol extraction in their kitchens at home unless you're making some nice herbal vodka or gin, perhaps. But essentially, if you're cooking a sort of traditional casserole or stew or stir fry or a dal, and you have that sizzling fat stage and then a simmering water stage, you're getting both components out as much as you can. So you're getting full spectrum of the herb, if you like.
I'd counter that we do have alcohol extracts of herbs, and they're wines and beers. There's a very good history of herbal wines and beers. Our typical hops-based beer being one of them.
Good point, Marion.
That's very nice to know. I once tried vodka from a birch tree, which was beautiful, where you just put a little kind of screw in there and a bowl underneath, and it dripped out this very beautiful substance that he called birch tree vodka, and it was lovely. So, I mean, all plants have these wonderful benefits, and it's not just herbs and spices. We know about trees. We know that aspirin originally was a derivative from the willow tree. When you look at this whole system of medicine, you talked about the gut biome earlier, and I know that the research that Tim Spector has done is saying that you need 30 different plants, fruit, veg, nuts, seeds, herbs, whatever, in your gut every single week. And a lot of people will just go out and, have their broccoli and carrots. And I was guilty of doing that with my children. They liked broccoli and carrots, and so that was the vegetable on their plate every day. So can you talk to us a little bit more about the gut biome and the importance of getting this 30 in a day, and the fact that the herbs and the spices do count as part of the 30, don't they?
They definitely do. And you mentioned Tim Spector, and this was part of the American Gut Project, and they looked at 10,000 people from all around the world. And this is where this figure of 30 came from, because like you say, most of us are striving for 5 a day, and we're trying to eat the rainbow. Or at Pukka, we talk a lot about drinking the rainbow through herbal teas and juices and things as well, vegetable juices preferably. And this research showed that people who hit that number, it didn't really, if they ate 50 types a week, it didn't really enhance it significantly. But if they ate less, say 20, their microbiome wasn't as diverse and as healthy. But it doesn't just have to be fruit and veg. It can be whole grains, nuts and seeds. And also herbs and spices definitely count, but they're a quarter of a portion. So if you add turmeric to meal, it doesn't count as a portion towards your 30. But if you add turmeric, cinnamon, fenugreek and black pepper, 4 different spices, then that counts as one of your 30 a week. And it is really fascinating. If you think about it, our hunter-gatherers ate a very diverse diet. So up until a few hundred years ago, we were eating many, many, many different foods throughout the year. And now I think the modern diet is about 17 different agricultural plant crops at most, predominantly, say, wheat, rice, maybe a bit of barley or maize in there. So this idea that our guts have become a little bit depleted, the microbiome, because the diet is so lacking in diversity. And it's quite a fun challenge for people. We did something called the Pukka Happy Gut Challenge, and we gave everyone a little tally chart in the office a few years ago. And if you're having a stir fry sprinkled with sesame seeds, you can have quite a lot of different types of plant foods in there.
The curry. A curry, massive hitter.
Exactly. And I do use this with my clients, and it really helps those people who tend to favour the same 5 to 7 fruit and veg each week. And they're dutifully getting 5 to 6, 7 portions a day. But like you say, it's carrots, broccoli, peas, bananas, and an apple. So yeah, Marion, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we know that this variety of different, this diversity is really helpful for us, and one of the reasons it is so good for us is that all of these different plant foods contain different plant chemicals And each of those different plant chemicals is particularly beneficial for specific good gut bacteria or others. So we know that there are one of the types of plant chemicals is polyphenols. And we know increasingly that when people have really high levels of polyphenols in their diet, they have really good overall health. And a big connection for that is the effect that these polyphenols are having on the gut bacteria. So you're feeding your gut bacteria, and they are helping you stay healthy.
And we also have to talk about the fact that there is a gut-brain axis, that they are connected. And so if you have a healthy gut, you're more likely to have a healthy brain, and vice versa. That isn't really talked about an awful lot in the mainstream, or anywhere near as much as it should be. And I met Jamie Oliver last year outside a demonstration at Downing Street, handing in a petition, and he's done tremendous work trying to get healthy foods into children's school. But when I spoke to him about the gut-brain axis and our children's mental health, he said, I'm just beginning to learn about that. And you just and I said, do you think the government know about it? And he said, well, I'm struggling to make them understand that that there's any nutrients, that that a healthy lunch at school is going to make a difference for our children. And this is a problem that we see across the board, not just in schools. We see it in hospitals, we see it in prisons, we see it everywhere, where this is not given the validation that it should be given. And I'd like one of you to speak on that. And I know you do sterling work at Pukka on education, and we will come to that.
One of the reasons that it's not sort of mainstream knowledge yet is because it's still sort of an area of burgeoning understanding within science. And I think scientists quite rightly are reluctant to sort of start singing things from the rooftops before they're really sure of exactly what the science is telling us initially. So I think that's the reason why it's not so sort of well understood and so well known, is because we're still figuring it all out ourselves. But there are kind of basic take homes that we do know, and that is things like the increasing the diversity of your diet, eating more plant foods. We know those are a bit of a no-brainer. There was an interesting development earlier this year over in the US, and some long-term studies looking at the health benefits of flavanols, which are a particular type of polyphenol found in cocoa, but also found in things like green tea and black tea and things like apples. It was found that from quite a few different studies that people who are consuming around 500 milligrams a day of this particular plant chemical had much lower overall mortality, and also showed cognitive benefits in there. So that's linking into the gut-brain axis thing.
You just said lower mortality. Do you mean higher mortality?
No, they had lower mortality. They were less likely to die.
Oh, right, sorry. So, and they had cognitive benefits.
Better cognitive abilities. Yeah, they showed cognitive benefits, so they were less likely their memory was less likely to get worse as they got older.
I've just done a podcast with Patrick Holford actually on this, Alzheimer's, and it's obviously his passion. And my mum had dementia, and it's horrible living with somebody that has got this, and there are things that we can do to help it. And I want to talk a little bit about doing the 30 a day. So for me, one of my big meals of the week is roast dinner, and I try and make sure that I have that 30 in my roast dinner that I serve my girls on a Sunday, by using lots of herbs and spices and roasting every vegetable under the planet that I can possibly find of, and steaming a million others, and then I eat it all throughout the week. So obviously not chopping it up a lot there. And a nut roast, I can get 10 herbs, spices, nuts, berries and everything in a nut roast. So this is one way of doing it. But a lot of people use herbs from the supermarket, and I know that my mum had herbs in her cupboard for years and years and years, because she didn't use a lot of it. Can you give us some kind of indication of how long you think you should keep a herb for it to have benefits for the body?
it's always good to be guided by the best before date on anything you buy. But I did find some herbs and spices from the 1980s in my mother-in-law's spice rack one Christmas. So this is a common problem of people buy maybe a herbal spice for a specific recipe, and then it lurks on their spice rack, which is quite often next to the cooker in quite a warm, light place, which isn't ideal for preserving herbs and spices. So traditionally, the idea would have been to buy whole grains and grind them fresh for the recipe, but not many people have time to do that today. But the best advice is to buy little and often, and quite often health food shops, you can go and refill your jars from bigger jars. And I definitely say buy organic, because if you're buying organic herbs and spices, there's not much of a price differential between non-organic herbs and spices and organic, but there's a massive differential when it comes to quality and what might have happened to the herbs and spices. So quite often they might have been irradiated or have binders and fillers and things added to them. So buying organic is just a way to quality screen, if you like. And we also know that organic farms have 50% more wildlife on them, biodiversity, than non-organic farms. So definitely the idea is to love your spice rack. Every 3 months I do dust it down and take things down and have a look. I'm just looking at it now, and I do have brown jars. That helps with the light issue. And I try to have it away from the oven. But it's a really good idea to love your spice rack, because then your spice rack will love you.
So I want to bring up eradication there, because when I discovered that, I didn't, when I started my journey, I didn't know about that. So I just thought, I didn't know the difference between an organic herb and a non-organic herb. Could you talk to us about eradication and the process that the herbs go through, basically, to give them a longer shelf life?
Oh, so irradiation, yeah, it's just treating them. I mean, all herbs and spices do need to be cleaned and dried properly. There's all sorts of things in herbs, insects and eggs, and so all of that needs to be cleaned. And some of our herbs, we steam them for that purpose. But organic, you're not allowed to add things like insecticides and pesticides, fungicides, and then you're not allowed to add binders and fillers and artificial colours and things like that. So yeah, it just means the herbs get to you in a purer, wholer state. And there's a fascinating stream of research showing that organic herbs and spices, and indeed organic foods, whether they're fruit and veg or meat or dairy, actually are more nutrient rich than non-organic. And we can talk about that a little bit more if that's of interest. But there's so many reasons to buy organic where you can. So the idea behind that, if you think about it, an organic plant isn't cosseted as much as a non-organic plant. And by that, I mean, it isn't sprayed with pesticides every month. It isn't treated with fungicides. It isn't really treated with much, to be honest. So the plant has to fend for itself a lot more. And these compounds that Marion's been talking about, polyphenols, etc., they're quite often related to the plant's ability to survive and thrive. So they may help it stop being eaten by a caterpillar, or help it stop being burnt by the sun, or succumb to disease. So the more a plant is on its own and having to fight for itself, the higher the levels of these beneficial compounds. So they're compounds which are beneficial for the plant's survival, but they're also beneficial for us, because we are co-evolved from plants many, many years ago, millions of years ago, but we've got similar chemical pathways, and Marion can pick up on this. So there's the idea, if you buy a non-organic plant that's been cosseted and sprayed, it just hasn't got those same levels. And the research is showing there's up to 60% more antioxidants, polyphenols in organic food versus non-organic. There's more omega-3 healthy fats in meat and fish. And you can take it one extension further. I'm a big forager, and I do try and eat something wild every day, because a wild plant is even less cosseted than an organically grown plant, in that it hasn't been put in the soil. It's got to just get the light it needs, the nutrients it needs from the wild. So I really encourage people to try and forage a little bit for some wild food in a safe way as well.
I'm a massive forager. It is one of my passions. And as I came home this morning, I discovered some new mushrooms that have come up, and I know you have to be really careful with mushrooms, but a new whole patch of mushrooms, and I'm so getting out there after this podcast, and they'll be going in the oven, drying them out nice and slowly for the winter, because I love foraging. Marion, tell us a little bit more. Take this one step further on the science front for us, please.
Well, I mean, we know that the herbs quite often are considered weeds in our garden, and it's because they thrive in really tough, hard places to grow. So we have a number of herbs that that Ayurvedic herbs that Pukka specifically uses, and they're herbs like shatavari and ashwagandha, and they often thrive in some of the hardest places for any other plant to grow, and they also are the sorts of herbs that help us thrive when we're under stress. So the more stress you put the plant through, the more likely it is to have things that will help a human deal with that stress as well. So,
isn't Mother Nature incredible? I mean, I'm just in awe of Mother Nature. One of the things that you did that I was really impressed by, were you were one of the first companies to take out plastic from tea bags, because again, this was something I didn't know for many years, that, you know, a lot of cheap teas, and they come in tea bags, and they have plastic in those tea bags, and they have plastic strings, and your string and everything, it's all organic, and we're not putting those plastics into our body. And so can you talk about how you build a company, what, you know, how you recognize what you've got to do?
well, it's a massive group effort, isn't it? It's just a lot of different people getting all the right expertise and recognizing that no one person can answer all the questions. So it's just a big team effort, I think, and just getting all the right people in the right places, having a packaging technologist, having, you know, someone whose only role is to look at sustainability and to make sure that the business is sustainable. So I think it comes down to that. Jo, have you got anything you wanted to add?
No, it's definitely a team effort, and there's always more work to be done. So something we're really proud of is we now have a home compostability certificate for our used tea bags, and we're always trying to work out ways to use the tea bag again. So you can actually put tea bags on your eyes, a lovely compress, and you can make face masks out of them and do all sorts of things once you've drunk your tea. But ultimately, they can then go in your home compost, because lots of consumers were finding, like you say, that they were composting their favorite tea bags, and 6 months later there were loads of strings of plastic that the wormery had rejected, and the worms do push the plastic up to the top, and it's pretty distressing to find it all. And you just realize that there's no such thing as throwing something away in landfill. It doesn't go away. So all our tea bags are now certified home compostable, but we're now looking at the challenge of being able to remove some of the envelopes from our teas, which can go in your paper recycling along with the tag. And we do get a lot of challenges about why are our teas individually wrapped in envelopes, and it is to retain the quality of the essential oils, which have so much of the therapeutic effect and the taste. But we are looking at, for some blends, whether we can remove those sachets. So that's a long-term project, but we're always looking at where next, you know, that you don't sort of stand still and say, right, we're there, we're great. It's definitely onward work in progress all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, because I wondered at first why you had all of them in little bags, and then I discovered, and, you know, kind of learned more about the flavors and keeping it fresh and keeping it you know, healthy. But, you know, I have a wood burning stove, and so mine go in my wood burning stove, so I don't have to recycle them. Can you put your tea bag packets in the tea bags? You can put in the compost, but the packets, the sachets, can you put those in the compost?
The sachets are paper. We always would encourage our consumers to recycle, because it's good quality cardboard that can go back to the waste stream to be recycled. And I love it when consumers say, I even take off the tea tag from my compost. So they put the tea bag in the compost, but they take the little tea tag and put that in the paper waste stream. So that there's real sort of dedication out there. But I think it's always best to put paper back in the recycling system. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I worry about the recycling system. I'm not going to lie. Having brought my children up very frugally, that they had to open their presents incredibly carefully with a blunt knife so that I could iron the paper and reuse it again year after year. And I still have wrapping paper that my children had when they were 3 years old. 20-year-old Christmas wrapping paper comes out. And I'm very, very strict on this, and I always have been. I've heard you, Jo, talk about statistics of the carbon footprint of organic farming on the planet. Can you throw some of those at us today?
As far as carbon footprint of farming, we have a best practice organic program, and a big part of that is working with our farmers to make them more, it's climate mitigation, to make them more secure in the face of climate change, reduce their carbon impact, work with water scarcity, all sorts of things like that. So organic is great, but we need to go further. And there's this whole talk of regenerative agriculture, which is including the much bigger picture. So at Pukka, we call it best practice organic program to help differentiate from people just buying organic. And just going back to what you said, I asked Helen Browning of the Soil Association, if people can't afford to buy all organic, what should they buy? And her answer really surprised me, so I'll share it now. And she said wheat products. I thought she'd say meat or fish because things can get concentrated up the food chain. But she said wheat products because glyphosate and other sprays have such a harmful impact, and wheat is grown on such a wide scale, and it's in so many different products. And looking at wheat products, bread and biscuits and things like that, they aren't necessarily a lot more expensive if you buy the organic versus the non-organic. So
that's very interesting. I'm a massive fan. I'm a member of the Soil Association, and I do love their work. And I know you have a program with them, don't you, at Pukka?
We do. They're on our mission council. Helen Browning is on our mission council, so she helps guide Pukka's mission and make sure we're aligned with our purpose, and do everything as sustainably, ethically, fairly as possible, and that we consistently lead in that regard.
That is very good to know. They do sterling work out there, unlike their National Farmers Union, who I stopped my membership to.
Yes, so we do support the policy work of the Soil Association as well. We've done some work in them in the past in schools and education, a subject close to my heart, called oh, my brain has gone. It's the Good Food Stands, I think. Marion, what's it called?
No idea, sorry.
Anyway, but we support the Soil Association's policy work as well.
Great. You also have been started working with some universities, and I want to talk about that because I know that we were talking earlier that you trained as a teacher, Jo, and that I know you've gone into schools and spoken to children because they know so few plants now, that you have been educating right the way down from the grassroots. But you've started working with universities now. So you did something with Manchester, and I believe you're doing something with Reading. Have you started the Reading programme?
So we do a programme of research and have done so for sort of the last 6 years. And the research is to look at the health benefits of herbs generally, and sometimes specifically our product. But we do this via setting up projects at universities and funding PhD studentships. So we've funded, I think the count is now 8 different PhD studentships, and getting people to do their own research projects that look at the health benefits. And at the moment we have studies running with University of West of England in Bristol, Southampton, Reading, where else? Exeter. So a lot of different places, and these are projects that are kind of range from everything from herb quality and how to look at herb quality, right up to clinical trials of products and specific herbs for health complaints and general well-being, really.
It's really good to know. One of the things I've never understood is why a doctor has so little training in diet and nutrition. It is painful how little training they have on it. How do you see that moving forward? How can that change? Do you think that is changing?
I think in terms of doctors getting training in nutrition, there's a really inspiring grassroots organisation called NutriTank, and we've had some interactions with them, and it was formed from a couple of medical students who were surprised and distressed at how little how little nutrition training they were receiving as part of their programme, and they've been campaigning to increase the amount of nutrition training that junior doctors and medical students receive. I think you also have a lot of really inspiring doctors who will go out there and find that information from themselves. And certainly in some of the circles and conferences that we've moved in with Pukka, we come across loads of really inspiring doctors who recognise this and go out there and learn for themselves. All the nutrition training that they missed out on. So I think things are changing, and I think because the media is the way it is now, there are influencers and people can find that information so easily and so quickly. Things will start to slowly change, I hope.
Yeah, it's slightly worrying though, because this is being filmed in October 2023, and very recently, last month, YouTube changed their guidelines so that you can't put anything up on YouTube now to do with health that isn't in line with the World Health Organization, the WHO. It just, how is this going to pan out for mankind if we can't get that information out? And I think that's why it's so important that you're doing the grassroots work. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for that.
Well, interestingly, the World Health Organization has recently announced that they're going to set up a global centre for research in traditional medicine, which will be based in India. So I think, there are some worrying things that happen, but there are also lots of really positive and exciting things that also happen, and lots of developments. And from my perspective, as someone who sort of looks and works with researchers, I see a lot of people who are really excited and interested by plants and doing research into herbal medicines and traditional medicine. So I think that there is more to be excited about than there is to be worried about. Jo, sorry.
Really good to hear. I didn't know that. Thank you for telling us. Jo, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say it links really nicely to Pukka's advocacy program that we're just launching. One aspect of which is this area of lifestyle medicine and the need for doctors and clinicians to have more training. And this whole idea of getting the use of culinary herbs and spices more widely recognised by trying to get them in as part of the government's Eat Well guidance, but B, doctors having training on how to use them within a GP medical setting, or else as part of the growing social prescription movement, this idea of beyond pills, particularly in regards to metabolic health. And this is something that Pukka have been working really hard on over the last year. So Marion can fill in more on the research side, but we're really excited about this advocacy program.
Yeah, so I've been writing a scoping review, just looking at what literature is out there on the health benefits of culinary doses of herbs and spices. So if you only consume them in the amounts that you can reasonably have in a dish of food, so we're looking at things like between 2 and 6 grams at a time. What health benefits can we actually see? And although we will need more evidence, there is quite good evidence already for culinary doses of some of the herbs and spices that we commonly use. Things like cinnamon, turmeric, ginger, nigella seeds, fenugreek. Lots of those show a lot of promise for this sort of thing. And one of the studies that we're funding is at Southampton University with Dr. Merlin Wilcox, and that's a study where they're looking at what people with type 2 diabetes in the Afro-Caribbean community in Southampton, what they understand about herbs and how they can be good for their health, and then marrying that up with what do we know about herbs and how they can be beneficial or preventative for things like type 2 diabetes. And then the end result will be to produce some educational material that doctors can give out to patients that will help guide them in the best choices that they could be making with herbs that they could be using at home to help with their health.
That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, you do some sterling work, and if it wasn't for companies like Pukka, if we left it down to some of the supermarket chains just to bang out their food, where would this planet be? So that is really good to know. And I'd like you to tell the audience, first of all, your resources, where they can find you, your webpage, because I know you don't do a lot on social media, do you?
No, looks like Jo's.
Oh, I don't think our social media manager would be happy. We do have, the thing is, it's a global social media, so things get posted that are only globally relevant, if you like. But our website's pukkaherbs.com, and we've got lots of resources on there. People can find out about individual herbs and what they do. We alluded to earlier, but we can't really say too much about the health benefits of herbs because of the health claims regulation, because we're selling teas. But a really fantastic resource is herbalreality.com, which very much goes into detail on each herb and how they're traditionally used and the research to support. So I'd really recommend people look at Herbal Reality as well if they want to learn more. So we've done a lot of work in the past with the Soil Association and their Food for Life programme, which is a fantastic programme going into schools, encouraging them to grow herbs in the classroom and then learn about their health benefits and how to use them in recipes. And we've also got an education element in our advocacy programme, working within schools in London to teach children about the health benefits of herbs and spices as well.
Oh, ladies, that has been such fun for me. I could talk about herbs for forever and a day. It is one of my favourite topics, and we have only just touched the tip of the iceberg. But thank you so much for coming on the show today. It has been just lovely to have you. Pukka Herbs, Jo, Webber, Marion. Remind me,
Mackonochie.
Mackonochie. Oh, I'm so sorry. What am I like? I'm highly dyslexic, and I'm looking at that going, I can't even read my writing.
It's fine. It's been lovely to have lovely to be here. Thank you, Philly.
Brilliant.
Bye.
Lovely rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye, guys.